Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about the most critical step to repair from conflicts, which is also the hardest thing to do.
No big deal. We're just going to start with the hardest step of them all.
Yeah. Well, in general, repairing from conflict, I would say, is the most important topic that we have covered or could cover.
Agreed.
And, we've talked from time to time about what really makes you a great partner. And of the many possible answers, really the biggest thing it comes down to, we believe, is how you fight. Mm-hmm. And there's one particular aspect that I personally want to dive into, because this one thing is really, honestly, the hardest thing to do.
It is a hard thing to do.
But it's the most critical.
It is. It's so critical. And, conflict, you've heard us say before, you guys, is not something to avoid. We can tell you this 100 times and probably still need to hear it as a reminder. Avoiding conflict in the short term builds resentment in the long term. So you hear us talk about the goals around conflict. And one of the goals, which we're going to be talking about today, is the repair process, to repair faster and better. And this step that we're going to go into is the hardest step of them all and the most important to really make sure it's resolved.
Well, if you didn't catch that, there's two things, because you said them kind of in the same sentence. You can avoid, which leads to the resentment, but you can also get into conflicts. And if you're not fully repairing them, though, it erodes your connection. It leads you into these argument hangovers, which really are one and the same thing. The longer those stretch out, the more disconnected you feel. There's just a lot of feeling there about having low energy, about being disappointed. You can get to feeling kind of depressed in a sense, or like that things are just not ever going to change. These are all of the feelings from not truly repairing.
Exactly. Well, and since repair is so important, before we go into the most critical and most challenging step of them all, we have a surprise gift for you all. And those of you listening, you're finding out about this before anyone. I mean, we're not announcing this on social media. We're not announcing this on our newsletter until Baby Freeman comes. So if you're listening, it's because you get like sneak peek early access. So we recorded in studio, so it's like super nice and fancy, a WebClass that is free. And it's on the 5 steps to fully repair after an argument, so you reconnect in minutes instead of hours, days, or weeks. Plus, we are sharing in that web class the communication skill, like the communication skill, to prevent unnecessary conflicts from even happening. And this web class is going to be one that you not only are going to watch and take notes, and we model the steps. Like, imagine watching us model what it would sound like to repair. But this is going to be one that you might even want to watch multiple times, because there's so much in it, and it honestly addresses so many of the challenges that couples have in that repair process for conflict. So go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com/repair. And that /repair is important because that's how you get to the repair web class specifically. It'll also be linked in the show notes. And get early access before anyone else online. Like, we're keeping this a secret until Baby Freeman comes, but because you're a podcast listener, you get to find out now.
So we're not going to go into these steps here, obviously, why we have the web class now available. So I want to see you on there for sure. But let's talk about the most critical step, which is also the hardest. And again, we're giving you this like out of order. But the second step in the process is responsibility.
Yeah. So responsibility is not blame. I think that's the first thing we just need to address, because when we talk to people about, hey, we got to look at your part, your responsibility, people can go, but I'm not to blame. Like, it's not all on me. That's not what responsibility means. What do you think is a better way of viewing responsibility, Aaron?
Oh, you kind of jumped ahead. The responsibility is just intent versus impact, and impact of an action. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So taking responsibility, I feel like we're jumping way ahead here, but you just have to understand that it's not necessarily this personal thing. As you mentioned, you don't have to feel shame or guilt, or that it's all on you. One of the other things we hear is, well, it's not my fault because I didn't start this. And that's a key place to really start to look. It doesn't matter necessarily who started it. It really is about that during that conversation, if it was simple and it escalated, then you really just want to look at what role did I play in either this escalating or, and also similarly, doing more damage than was really necessary. Because how many of you, honestly, raise your hand if you're just listening to this, no one's going to see you, but you think to yourself, at this point, I honestly don't even know what caused this. I don't even know how we got here. And you're honestly arguing over something from the past. You're arguing about something and you're now even more heated because of something they just said. So now it goes even further. So basically, it's really just to come back to responsibility is you took an action and that action had an impact on your partner.
And this is so challenging for people, including us, this whole idea of, but that wasn't my intent. And you'll fight for your intent. That's not what I intended to say. That's, you misinterpreted it. You took it the wrong way. There is a difference, and we talk more about this in the web class, between your intent and the impact you had. So exactly to what you were saying, Aaron, like taking responsibility is just taking ownership that, like you said, your actions had an impact, and that may be different than what you intended. Which that's why this can be one, like the hardest step, because in our minds, it's like, no, that's not what I meant. And it can be really hard to reconcile that difference of what you thought the impact would be, but then what the impact actually was. And it's like, no. And you can fight for your intent all day long, but you have to just look at, how did this impact my partner?
And so why is this the hardest thing to do? Well, we could blanket statement this and say your ego. And to actually dive into like what the ego actually is would be a multiple episode
Give us a short version though.
Well, I don't even know if I'm necessarily an expert, but an ego is really just a certain personality. And we don't realize that we have not just one fixed personality. It's something that is our tendencies. It is our patterns. It's just kind of our default way of being, thinking, and acting. And primarily that's going to come from a place of like survival, right?
I have a good way of describing ego. It's that human part of us that we all have that likes to be right. I think that's really simplified way. It's like, it likes to be right, and it also likes to be protected, and it likes to be safe.
I think the main thing is protected.
Yeah.
It tries to keep itself safe, which, again, this is a whole other conversation, but the ego is not even you, but it does such a great job of having you identify the ego as yourself.
Yeah.
So that's how it gets you to lash out, to do things out of anger, do things out of fear towards your partner that in a rational mind you wouldn't necessarily do. But this ego kicks in, and when the emotions are escalated, you're doing something to help yourself survive and to be safe and to protect yourself, even though the ego itself is not actually you. So it's a very complex thing. And so in those moments, though, this is like, okay, my partner is doing this to me. So why is this the hardest thing? You're kind of fighting against the default pattern of keeping myself, quote unquote, safe.
Oh, yeah. What feels like the most important thing to do is to protect ourselves, to not feel pain, not feel hurt. And sometimes it can be kind of like hurtful-ish to acknowledge your own responsibility, because it's like, ooh, I don't want to see that part of myself.
Well, yeah, I think to admit, right? That's an interesting word that you used. It has kind of like a yucky feeling about it. Primarily, I think, because you have to look at a certain side of yourself that you're not proud of.
True.
And that might be one of the main aspects on why this is so hard. Because all you really need to do, honestly, in repair, again, this is one of 5 steps, but the only thing you really need to do is to come to your partner and share, hey, in how that went. It doesn't matter who started it. Right now, I'm not even concerned about being understood or expressing my side of things. I just want you to know that where I take responsibility is, maybe something I said, an action I took or maybe didn't take that I said I was going to. It could be a tone, It even could be an attitude, right? And it's really saying, I know that when I did that it had an impact on you. And I can imagine that had you feel pretty maybe manipulated, had you feel pretty disrespected. And that's how I can imagine that would feel. Now, again, we're going more into this in the web class, but then I would follow up by saying, I'd really like to hear from you how that did impact you. Did I miss anything?
And the reason why that part is important, because some of you might be wondering, well, why is it so important to acknowledge the impact of your actions, is because when that's not done, that's the emotional residue that keeps sticking with you.
That's right.
It's not like that just disappears. Your partner and you would be carrying that around like a backpack, and that's that emotional baggage that weighs you down.
That's right.
So the impact is the stuff that you need to clear out the clutter so that you kind of just let go of that baggage, and it's not something that now you'll bring up in a few weeks because you're still impacted by it.
Let me say something to what you just said in case someone misheard that. When you say let that emotional baggage go, what we're saying here is what's required for your partner to be able to actually let that go is for you to share where you see there's responsibility on your side, and then allow them to share the impact. And then you have to validate that. Hey, I know it wasn't my intent, but in this case, it doesn't matter. When I did this, what I'm hearing you say is it impacted you, that you felt that I didn't love you, right? And now you have some doubt. You're questioning whether I even like you anymore, right? Like, I know we've heard people say that, and you've even mentioned that before. Like, I know that there's love here. Do you still like me? So I really got to own. At this point, I have to own, no matter what your partner says, you have to hear what they say and own, no matter if you think it makes sense or not. When I did that, yeah, it had you feel that.
Ooh, and I know people are like hearing this going,
this is why it's the hardest.
Hard and here's another reason it's hard. If that's not all enough, is because our tendency as humans can be to focus on the other. We are typically very biased in our own favor. And I mean, think about it. You're always like, no, I'm the innocent one. And what they said or did was worse than me.
I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for what they did first.
Yes, if-then statements.
Look, we know what you say to yourself. And we know, we know. We've done too many coaching calls. We know. Oh, to your point. Yes, we do this too. We are promising you with 100% certainty you will not find anything in relationship content out there in the world. Seriously, I can say this 100%. There is no way to truly repair from conflicts without doing this.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Relationships end, and I know this is kind of going to like the extreme end of things, because mostly they were not willing to take responsibility. It was always the other person. And if both of you are doing that, then no one's moving things forward. Now, I wanted to go back to what I was about to go into. Another reason that this is challenging, I think we've given like 8 reasons it's challenging, is because you are focusing on they need to acknowledge their part.
Totally.
And I only did this because they did this. No. What we got to do, and I know it's challenging, I have a hard time with this too sometimes, is to step up and take responsibility first, and even if they don't. Because look, you can either go to bed at night seeing yourself as someone that's conditional and, I will only take responsibility if they do. Or you can go to bed at night knowing yourself as someone who is empowered and who is willing to take that ownership. I think it gives you a level of respecting yourself. Like, I respect myself for the fact that I'm going to take responsibility, and then my partner, maybe they'll follow my lead. Maybe it'll take them more time, and obviously we would hope that they would step into this process with you. Hence, watch the web class together if you can, if they're willing to, because obviously both of you doing this, we are not saying you, the one listening, should be always doing this and your partner never does, either they're going to watch you and then start to follow your lead, or you want to invite them into this process as well.
Mm-hmm. But someone has to be willing to go first.
Yes.
And put all those other logical things aside. As soon as you start talking about the order of events and that's not how you remembered it and that's not what you said, you've already lost. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you. And there's a really hard part too. Let me just kind of say this slightly different. When you're taking responsibility and you share, we've watched this happen with couples that we've personally coached. We don't let them stay there. But even when we do this, it's a powerful place for one partner to say, here's where I take responsibility, and I imagine it impacted you this way. And we could watch it, and it does move the repair process forward. Mm-hmm. But if you just leave it at that and say like, oh, I'm sorry, and feel like that's enough, we've literally watched the other person's body language sink. Because it's like, okay, I mean, and they even say this, right? Thanks for saying that. Mm-hmm. And it even has that energy. Why? Because you have not gotten to express the real impact for you. Mm. It's nice for them to say, your partner to say, hey, here's where I take responsibility, and here's what I imagine the impact is. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, that's going to be probably better than, to be honest, most of you listening, you probably don't even get there. But the real thing is to listen to your partner when you ask, how else did that impact you? Mm-hmm. This is where the freedom comes from. This is where you actually get to drop the emotional baggage. But in that moment, if you say anything that invalidates that, you go back to zero.
That's
you
so
you
true.
Literally get rid of all the progress you made in repair.
So it takes, and we'll model this for you in the web class, like how to just really be with whatever they say, because they're going to say it and you might not see it the same way. You might not agree. It might be hard to hear.
You're like, how could that possibly be?
But you just stay over there and you hear them and you validate it. We promise you. Look, your choices in the repair process are either going to lead you to moving forward in a constructive way or backwards in a destructive way. Mm-hmm. Which one do you want? Move forward, move backwards. You're either
I acknowledge you for this. You said in the repair process, you're either moving towards emotional healing or creating emotional baggage. Yep. These are the only two options you have.
Exactly. So a lot here. Anything more you want to say about this hard step here? I mean, we gave them a lot of...
No, I personally want to talk about this. It is the hardest I find. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know if maybe feminine energy or females find it just as difficult. I could assume.
I totally think so, because it's challenging for me.
So that's why we wanted to bring this one up specifically. Now, there are so many ways to help you get yourself in the right state to do this. And then especially when you and your partner have the entire 5 steps and you're actually working through this together, we promise you that your argument hangovers will shorten. Mm-hmm. We promise you things there's other processes to keep it from escalating, mm-hmm. but you will actually emotionally repair. Mm-hmm. So really do go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com/repair. It's free. Mm-hmm. This is probably one of the very best teachings on the very best topic, conflict repair, that we've ever done. And this 1 hour, we promise you, will forever change how you handle conflict and repair, which will forever transform your relationship.
Exactly. So with this, we invite you, whether you had a recent disagreement and you've been holding out on repairing, now we're really inviting you to step up. Or if you haven't had one in the last couple days, we're happy that hasn't been the case, but make sure you mark this down to be something that you are going to do right afterwards.
Well, you could, right? Go back and look at one that wasn't repaired from however long ago, right?
That's very true. So with that, everyone, we love you, and Baby Freeman will be here any day. So be on the lookout. Whoop, whoop. Be on the lookout online. We'll for sure announce it. We're so excited to introduce you to her and share her name. And please do send us a note if you enjoy the web class, even before we publicly share about it. We would just love to know who's watching it, because you as the podcast listener, you get early access. That's how much we love you. And we will talk to you on the next episode.